Good afternoon, or even good evening, everyone. Welcome to this last and probably the shortest panel of the conference. I would like to end this great conference with some rays of hope and to make it a happy end. But the title of our panel, New Autocratization Trends versus Democratic Renewal, I don't know, I think it will be tricky to bring the happy end to you, especially as we are meeting in the capital of a country that is not considered a democracy anymore, but rather the electoral autocracy. And as I'm representing Poland, which is the country that is still considered the electoral democracy, but it might, the hope might end this Sunday, as we are expecting parliamentary elections, and the opinion polls don't bring much hope. So I really would love to hear some optimism from you to make me leave this mood of doom and gloom. So all-star panel, I hope, will be helpful to me and to us. So during this 45 minutes, more or less, we'll try to answer 3 questions. The first one will be, what is the status quo on this spectrum between autocratization and democratization, where we are? The second one will be why we are there, why autocratization is so thrilling to the people, to the voters, why do they vote for autocrats? And the third one will be democratic renewal, hopes, optimism, and maybe some advice. So now I will ask you all for really quick answers, 3 minutes maximum to each of the questions. And I will start with Gábor Kerpel-Fronius, the deputy mayor of Budapest, and also playing the devil's advocate for the beginning. I would like to ask you not only about the state of democracy, autocracy in Hungary, but also, you know, we are meeting here, we can criticize Hungary as much as we want now. At least I can. You are the vice mayor of Budapest, while you are the opposition member, and also the mayor is the opposition member. So is that really so bad?
Yes, it is a tricky question, and I think you have to start with the second question, answering the second question first.
Please not.
So, I will not embark on whether these autocracies actually deliver on their promises, but the context is set for their ascension to power, really, and I think their attractiveness is basically a result of unfulfilled promises of our democratization process. And there was this excellent expression which we used about a decade ago about democratic backslide. And it really describes that first we thought that there were some glitches in the construction and there were some errors in the democratization process, and we didn't realize how the quality of democracy actually started gradually to deteriorate. And before 2010 we had an economic crisis and we had a very ineffective government. So basically what autocrats actually promise is that with a strong hand government, which is part of one very strong undercurrent of Hungarian political culture, they could provide a more effective government with centralization and with breaking down barriers, checks and balances and whatever, which stand in the way of an effective government. And I think this is one of the problems, and why we have a problem of definition, and why we have a problem of you know, seeing a black and white answer to your question is that the process has been so gradual, and Fidesz and Orbán have been so careful in maintaining a lot of facades which belong to the among the tools of liberal democracy, that they can always point to certain institutions that still exist, and there always is some I think the narrative that we that as an opposition we use is sometimes quite anecdotic. So we point not to a great authoritarian narrative, but to certain examples of autocratic behavior, and then the government or the propagandists can very easily point to other anecdotal things that change the picture. And in the previous panel we had this reference to whataboutism, you know. So I think that plays a major role.
Thank you very much. So as Gábor said, democracy's dying is a process. So I would like now to ask Anja Wehler-Schöck, international editor at Tagesspiegel, about where is this process, or is this process in place in Germany? And I would like to ask you that about this in the context of the most recent elections in Hesse and in Bavaria, with significant gains of AfD.
Well, thank you very much, Karolina. As a journalist and as an international editor, I would like to place this question in a larger context, because I think the two aspects are very much interlinked. I think we need to look at the connection between democracy and the media. And we've observed that the media has been in decline worldwide, and that autocratic tendencies have been on the rise. Free media is, of course, the backbone of democracy. So if you look at the indicators, they're very worrying. Reporters Without Borders published its new report a little while ago on the state of press freedom in the world, and it states that the environment for journalism is bad in 7 out of 10 countries and satisfactory in only 3 of the 10. And Freedom House's most recent report goes in a similar direction. We've seen a decline in global freedom for the 17th consecutive year, and in less than half of the 195 countries have been analyzed or considered as free. So we're seeing these restrictions on media every day. If you look at Turkey, for example, Erdogan managed to secure another win after a campaign that was heavily influenced with tilted media coverage of candidates and topics, and steered towards Erdogan and his party. And we're seeing similar patterns within EU member states. The two examples were already mentioned. In Hungary and Poland, the free media is under heavy attack. We've seen several independent outlets that had to close. Funding is being cut. Ad placements are being restricted. Access to public institutions and figures is being denied. And journalists are being harassed and prevented from doing their jobs properly. And we're seeing that in the current Polish elections. We see a very tilted media that will undoubtedly have an influence on the outcome. So I think these are very serious serious developments. And we also see closing of independent media. For example, if you look at the US, since 2005, 2,500 media have closed. And this prevents many people from accessing independent information. It makes them a more easy prey to polarized social media, for example, and also to bad actors. And you're asking about Germany, about the recent elections. Of course, we were hoping that the AfD, the right-wing extremist group in Germany, saw a brief uptick after the Syrian migration crisis. But unfortunately, recently we've seen them grow stronger again and gain majorities in states where they were previously weaker. And of course, this all ties together, and populist strategies around the world are very similar, and they're profiting from people's frustrations, also from their fears. They're investing in strategies like fear-mongering, and also we've seen a heavy Russian influence through social media, through disinformation, and with the advances that we see on the technological front, including artificial intelligence, and this will only grow stronger. So unfortunately, you said, please provide optimism to the panel. I'm afraid I can't. I'm quite concerned by the rise in populism that influences our work as journalists, and that we see on the decline everywhere we look, and also on the capabilities that will increase for bad actors with advancing technologies like AI.
Thank you very much. I'm really sorry, but we have still 2 more rounds ahead, so you'll have a chance of bringing some optimism to our discussion. Now I'd like to ask Petra Guasti, an associate professor at Charles University in Prague. What's your take on the state of democracy versus autocracy today, and do you see any new autocratization trends?
Okay, thank you. So I will try to save time, and I will reserve it for the optimistic part. And I actually even dug out a little optimism for the end of this. So autocratization is surging. Autocracies are winning. 72% of world's population now live in autocracies. The global level of democracy has regressed to 1986 levels. What shall I say? There are more closed autocracies than liberal democracies around the world. The significant changes in the last 2 decades are especially in freedom of expression, rise in government censorship, rise in government repression of civil society organizations, and the quality of elections. So this was based on the VDEM 2023 report. Zooming in on our region, looking at Freedom House's Nations in Transit 2023 report, which I want to also shout out here. You can go and read it all. It won't be happy reading, but we need to know. So the region from Central Europe to Central Asia has seen a 19th consecutive year of democratic governance decline. Illiberal populism continues to challenge democratic standards in Europe as well as in Central Asia, particularly highlighting Hungary and Poland. And I promise a little, so the autocratizing rulers, I think it's all known, we've heard it now, increase in censorship, but also using, let's say, buying media. You can, like in capitalism, you can buy media, and we have seen that. So media ownership really matters. Now to the promised optimism, as media ownership matters, we have also seen great innovations in the region in terms of journalists and readers jointly owning media. This has been tried in Slovakia. It's Deník N, the Slovak newspaper. It has survived. It is thriving. It will need to thrive after the recent Slovak election, as the government formation promises more the Hungarian road than the Czech road. And finally, we have also seen cases where populism was defeated at ballot box in Slovenia and in Czech Republic. So populism can be defeated. It thrives where there is fragmentation, and we have seen, comparing the Slovak case, the Hungarian case, and the Czech case, that what the voters need is to have a choice. And so just anti-populism alone does not win at the ballot box. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this sentence. Populism can be defeated. We'll look more into that later on. And I see that Professor Zsolt, and now I will do a lot of mistakes in a short surname, Enyedi, is smiling, so I also hope for some smiling answer. Zsolt is a senior research fellow at CEU Democracy Institute and professor at CEU, so I would like you to give us your take on the state of democracy today, more also in more comparative historical perspective.
The trend Petra was describing started around the turn of the millennium, or at least at the financial crisis. And since then, indeed, as VDEM's data show, every year the countries that are undergoing autocratization outnumber the cases that are democratizing. So in that sense, the situation is bleak. There are counterexamples next to Slovenia and Czechia. I think we can also mention Brazil, maybe Guatemala, maybe the Philippines, in larger context, maybe South Korea. But the overall trend goes in one direction, and not only because some of the hard dictatorial cases become harder, like China and Russia, but also because relatively consolidated cases like this one become more autocratic, but the same you can see from India to Israel in many parts of the world. And you have fundamental questions within the elite about democracy, even in countries like United States. Now, trying to see a more positive aspect of the development, you need to look at the social realm as opposed to politics, because in society you see that in the last decades, social diversity became expressed in a less restricted form. There are more horizontal relations than in the past. Compare Ireland 40 years ago with what is it now. And these provide better conditions for democratic dialogue. Now, when you focus still on the political aspect, you also need to add, either on the positive or on the negative side, that the non-democracies of today are not as bad as the non-democracies of the past. You use the term, I think, electoral autocracies, by which we typically mean that they are autocracies but they run elections. But next to that, they also allow for considerable amount of personal autonomy and pluralism. And that makes the situation better from the point of view of the citizens. On the other hand, it makes the situation worse because it's more difficult to get rid of them, because they are not as clearly opposing democratic structures as in the past.
Thank you very much also for the rays of hope. Now the second round, as promised. Why are populists, why are autocrats so effective? Why? Because you, Gábor, mentioned the supply side of autocracy. So democracy doesn't deliver. What's the demand side? What is the voters' perspective? Why do they prefer autocratic politicians? Why do they prefer polarization, or why do they vote for people who incite violence and polarization?
Okay, I would build the dialogue up a bit differently, because I was like, I wanted to start on a very pessimistic note and then gradually arrive to being more optimistic. So when we talk about delivery, I think that the hope arises from the fact that our present autocracy does not really deliver. So it promised a more effective government, and we see that all the services that it has centralized, from education to healthcare to everything, is really worsening. And I agree with Zsolt that providing citizens with a great deal of autonomy actually makes them feel more secure, and I think protection is basically the buzzword of this present government. They will protect Hungarian values, they will protect Hungarian national interests from Brussels, from everybody else, because this is a very strong undercurrent in Hungarian cultural history, that our aloneness, that we are surrounded by enemies who want to take away our values, and I think Fidesz's narrative actually taps very well into this meta-narrative which exists for hundreds of centuries. But I think that after a certain while, people will be confronted with the fact that even though this narrative is very well built up, that we are in defense of Hungary against all our enemies, and they can blame their economic unsuccess. So first, in 2010, they began after a very ineffective government and the financial crisis, and they did actually have some results because their economic environment was much more favorable, so there was some growth, there was really an improvement in the situation of the middle class, etc., etc.
Yes, they don't deliver, but they still win. Why voters vote for them?
Because when they are confronted with success, the opposite of success.
Narratives, maybe.
Pardon? Failure, that's the word. When they're confronted with failure, their narrative provides with a very good scapegoat. So they are very good in playing the blame game. And I think that after a while, people will understand that that this narrative is leading us nowhere, because they will, after a certain time, have to understand, and I think this is where the question of local governments and municipalities come in, that there might be a different political culture that is engaging in dialogue with a lot of people who you have business with on the local level, and then you can show a different kind of approach. And I think that is something that we can build on, and it will not be a very short process, because and we will come to that in the third.
Great, thank you very much, Anja. So I would like to ask you why voters vote for people who bring in autocratic tendencies and reforms, and are the media part of the challenge?
Yeah, well, and I think what we're observing is that the populist forces really know their marketing. And they've understood how to use social media and other publication channels to transport their messages and to fearmonger and to use insecurities and frustrations that people have built up. And you just mentioned they don't deliver. Indeed, for example, if we look at the US, President Trump, before he became president, he was in a campaign trail in Indiana and said, we will reopen the steel mills. Of course, this never happened. It was completely unfathomable. But still, people in Indiana heavily voted for him twice. So we see that populists play on the narrative, social decline, for example, and don't deliver, but they still succeed. And I think the other side, the democratic spectrum, needs to up their game of strategic communications. And I heard it on the previous panel. I thought it was very relevant, and also for democratization, that politicians of the democratic spectrum really need to take the public seriously and present what they're doing, explain what they're doing, and and make people feel involved and give them ways of participation. I feel that there is also a decline in our political culture, and that we segregate into groups where people think like we do, and we exclude people who don't think like we do. So I think we need to move towards a political culture, a culture of political debate, where we show more tolerance and include people that don't necessarily share our opinions.
Thank you very much. And off to Petra. Why do voters vote for autocrats?
Okay, thank you. So I would separate the question into two. Why do they vote for them the first time, and why do they keep voting for them? Because that is a little bit different. They vote for them the first time usually when the previous Democrats fail. They fail for different reasons. They can be some leaks from phone calls, but basically they did not deliver. And they did not deliver both due to external but also due to internal reasons. And they may not have delivered because they were also not really very efficient in that. And perhaps they did not really want to understand or manage to understand that what the people were actually asking for in this region at the squares was not just democracy. They also wanted the supermarkets. And they were promised those supermarkets. They were promised economic standards of the West. And these promises were unattainable, and the voters realized. So I think that, you know, it's also like a hangover from all those hopes and promises. So that's how they got into power first. Then I also would be remiss to mention that the wannabe autocrats now have also started to heavily rely on surveys and on social science. They are able to collect large data on large samples and uncover grievances we as social scientists didn't even know existed. So they are very, very skilled in taking temperature of the room. Andrej Babiš, Robert Fico, I don't know about Orbán Viktor, but I know definitely about these two. They are hiring US companies, etc. I'm not speaking about Cambridge Analytica level, that's not possible here, but you can really do a lot with social science and survey. So that's how they get into power the first time. That helps them to stay in power. And then what they do once they get into power, they distort the balance of power. They skew the level playing field. I don't think we anymore believe that elections are stolen on election day. It's only the videos from Russia we all like to watch, like the lady climbing down with plastic bags full of ballots or putting them under her seat, etc., etc. And that's not how elections are stolen. Elections are stolen before the elections, when the access to media is denied to the opposition, when an opposition politician speaks on the television, the state television shifts to the great leader eating the favorite cake of John Paul II. This is how it's done. It's done by giving every opposition party 5 minutes on state television and keeping all the rest. It's by putting posters, look what all I did personally for you in front of every supermarket. This is where the elections, it's not the ballot box, it's much before that. We are having to do with Autocrats 2.0. They also read the reports of the election watchers, so they know how to adapt their strategy. So this is how they keep winning. And I think how they can lose is by offering people more than, so they are also dividing people. So they cannot be simply defeated by anti-Babiš, anti-Orban. It's not enough. It's not a program enough. You have to offer, or the politicians who want to defeat these populists, they must also offer something positive, something that is more uniting, that's offering a program, a better future for everybody. And I think I leave it completely out, but we shouldn't forget that people can also, in our countries, vote with their feet. And so if you have intelligence, like half of Slovak intelligentsia is in Prague. And so who remains? who remains and who are those who are left behind. Not everybody has the same possibility, but the elections are still happening. So if you are seeing that elections are a bit, that at home things don't have to be skewed, but skewing them abroad at the embassies, limiting access to embassies, etc., that's how it's done. So, thank you.
I just wanted to add to my question about why populists, autocrats are so thrilling to the voters, something that is kind of a follow-up on what Petra said, so that faults and weaknesses are not forgiven to Democrats, but they are actually turned into strengths by autocrats. When they are faulty, when they make mistakes, when they lie, they say everyone lies, everyone is stealing, and it's actually human to be like this, and that's what it turns to their strengths. So why they are so appealing to the people?
Absolutely. Cynicism and demobilization is one of the two important techniques that they use. There are also some very idiosyncratic factors, country-specific factors, like charisma of particular leaders, or particular problems with security or corruption during democratic regimes. When it comes to the more general structural factors, many analysts point at neoliberalism's controversial legacy. Some also emphasize the very disproportionate effects of globalization. But what I would like to underline more is the culture war. How it's really interesting to see how even autocratic forces that have a leftist background, like now Fico in Slovakia, jump on the bandwagon of culture wars. And they can do that, and they have to do that, partly because the changes that I described earlier have been really too fast for many people. So just imagine that, I don't know, an institution like same-sex marriage hasn't existed in the 20th century. And now we are in 23, and we have 30 countries that have it, and not only the West, but also, you know, from Estonia to Mexico, or from Slovenia to Ecuador, all over the world. And there are many arch-conservative people for whom this is too much. And the politicians who represent them have to be treated as representatives of certain values. So there is a kind of democratic linkage there, coming back to what Petra said about opinion polls and you know, this sophisticated measurement of public opinion. This also helps these leaders to stay representative. And that also means that what Gábor was speaking about, this fear of Hungarians that our national traditions will be kind of taken away from us and we lose our identity, is a very general story. You see it all over the world. And of course, once these people are in power, then they start to reshuffle the institutional framework exactly in the way like it was described, both not only the media, but in general the state, making the state basically being their weapon. And once you are against the illiberals, you are also against the state, and you are also against some illiberals who are in opposition. So the front on which you have to find as someone who tries to re-democratize your country is a huge front.
Thank you very much. So, Gábor, you're a politician, so you must have some optimism. So, what are the chances? Where do you see the chances for democratic renewal in Hungary?
Well, I am optimistic, and where I draw my optimism from is that there are certain cases. I think this whole construction is based on mistrust. So, and that probably is one of the things that remained well, I was born in the middle of the 60s, so I was raised in the good old socialist world. And I think that the idea of suspecting everything as being only a cover-up for something very material or very vested interest, I think that is what remained with us after the transition. And disinformation and misinformation and all these kind of manipulative tendencies, I think they found a very fertile ground here. And what you can and have to do is to try to build small circles of trust. And yes, the state is weaponized. Yes, resources of the state are very much used for party political purposes and to maintain this autocracy. But I mean, our example as momentum in 2019 during the European parliamentary elections was that we didn't have very much access to media, we didn't have very much access to resources. What we had to do was to go and convince 200,000 and 220,000 people on the streets, doing door-to-doors, etc. And of course in our local government election, it is much more divided, but what you have to do is to use the power that has been provided to you in local governments to set an example that things can be done differently, that things can be done successfully. You can achieve cultural change, even if your government is always trying to diminish the authority of local governments, always when it tries to diminish financial independence of municipalities. So it's not only taking away the money, it's also giving them the money, not by direct tax, not by allowing the municipalities to collect taxes directly, but actually assigning certain budgetary amounts for certain tasks, which diminishes the control of the municipality over their budgets and their priorities. And what you have to do is to try to use meaningful tools to increase citizens' engagement. So whether it is participatory budgeting as a tool for development ideas, or it is community planning where there are areas which have multiple functions in very, very small locations, and you have to try to find an optimum between the different interests and different desires of locals. You have to use these tools to show people that politics is not something that is decided above their heads and that's when the optimal solution comes, but when they get involved and try to engage with other people who have different ideas, and you have to build it up from basically from scratch. And you have to develop trust among people that you can do it in your own neighborhood, and then you can do it on a gradually greater level.
Thank you very much. Very constructive. Anja, what's your take? How to unite us?
I would say generally we need to practice and promote a strong culture of civic debate and pluralism of opinions within the democratic spectrum. And we need to counter the trend of fragmentation of society that we've been observing over the last few years. Traditional places of public debate like political parties or trade unions have been in decline, and so we need to make sure that we create other opportunities for people to be involved, to participate in the political decision-making process, and to participate in the public debate. So I think that's a very important step with very concrete opportunities. On a global level, I think we need to look at two things, and one is AI regulation. the EU is already headed in that direction. We need to create an intergovernmental panel to look at how we can work with companies to make sure that AI doesn't go completely uncontrolled and provide even more opportunities to bad actors. And the other thing is to look at social media. Platforms like Twitter have in some countries become the prime source for information for people. And so we need to discuss whether this should maybe be considered a global public good, and we could find adequate avenues for regulation as well.
Thank you very much. Petra, how in your view can we stop this autocratization trend? And what we hear a lot is public mobilization, but isn't what we see online?
Okay, thank you. So I mean, of course, like if I had the solution, I would probably like sell it to somebody. But you know, the municipalities don't have so much money these days. No, I want to organize the answer around two quotes by the first Czech president, who happened to be also a sociologist. And the first one is, "So we have democracy, and now we just need some democrats." And it is a perfect quote for telling us that institutions are necessary but not satisfactory condition for having and maintaining democracy. We need democratic elites and we need democratic citizens. We need the heart and minds. You cannot go around Tocqueville, you need it. There I would remind my favorite article about Hungary is by Bela Greškovic, and actually Viktor Orbán went for it too, the civic circles. How did he return to power? I really recommend that article to everybody. It's a really a very helpful lesson. So what I see, what I think, and then I will add the second quote, is each of us must endure the opinions of others. Democracy means discussion. And I would add that this discussion cannot be only among elites, it must have citizens. I would add, I agree, we are basically, half of my job was done by the deputy mayor. It's the democratic innovation. That's the secret words. That's the secret sauce. We need much more of that. We need it on local level. We can have it on national level. Germany is now having a Bürgerrat every year at the federal level on different topics. We have seen it, actual democratic innovations, the Constitutional Convention in Ireland, tackling the most difficult questions, actually, one of which Zsolt mentioned, which is same-sex marriage. There was also one on blasphemy, and there was one on abortion. And all of these issues, it was possible to resolve it by informing citizens, by letting them deliberate, by engaging citizens and existing representative institutions. Each of these were followed, conventions or democratic innovations were followed by a referendum, where the citizens who deliberated acted as voices, telling others, look, I also didn't know what to think. I never met any gay person in my village on the coast of Ireland. But I have now listened to everybody, I have talked to people, and I think that is not a threat to me. And I think people can identify. So if we select either randomly or a representative sample of people, provide them the expertise and let them really talk and let their voices then be heard, this can resolve the hardest issue. Who would have said 10 years ago that the Catholic Ireland will have both the possibility, reproductive rights and the right to marriage for everybody? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm growing more optimistic. And now, Zsolt, last but not least.
Well, I'm probably the worst person for an upbeat ending, but when you think about what are the right slogans and strategies for the opposition in such circumstances, I think what they have to realize that they have to balance two fundamental criteria. One is to be inspirational, to be able to mobilize. The other one is to reach out to those who have supported these autocratic parties and autocratic regimes. And it's a very difficult thing to do. Think about technocratic language. This is in principle, open for everyone. So maybe that should be used. But then who will vote? Who will devote free time to help these parties? Rule of law. Rule of law, I think, is better. Rule of law is definitely something that reaches people on the left and on the right. But again, probably it's too abstract. So you need more tangible and probably more emotional motivation than referring to rule of law. Not only that there is a fundamental misallocation of resources that makes the life of opposition extremely difficult, especially if the regime has lasted already a long time, but also in countries like Hungary, where the regime is in place for 15 years or so, people associate the term law with the regime. So when you try to mobilize them in favor of rule of law, they say, yeah, I'm in favor of that, so I vote for the government party. So you really have to find the right vocabulary, which is really, really difficult. To be honest, instead of being optimistic at the very practical level, I would like just to quote the very last sentence of the most famous Hungarian piece of theater that was written in 1862, I think, The Tragedy of Man, where the drama ends with God telling Adam and Eve that you should fight and trust, fight and believe. Now, it's really a very strange sentence, because just before that, God has shown Adam and Eve that everything will end in disaster, that there is no hope, actually. So how to make sense of it? And the way I make sense of it is that we don't do these things because we have very realistic plans for achieving things. We struggle because we are human beings, and that's it.
Okay, so I will also end with a quote. Václav Havel said that there are no grounds for optimism, but there are grounds for hope. And I wanted to say that, but in the end, after listening to you, I think that there are some grounds for optimism, and everything lies in inspiring citizen engagement and discussion with the public. So thank you very much for this, for being with us. I hope we brought you some happy end to this conference. Have a great evening, and please, fingers crossed for optimistic end of Sunday elections in Poland. Thank you very much.